So you want to be famous, see your name in print. Today on Zippy Point. I'm Brock Romanek, and I'm a big fan of yous. I started to gain experience with the media when I was with the SEC for the second time in my career, my second tour of duty. I was in Corp Fin's Office of Chief Counsel in the mid-90s, just as the internet was taking off, and I unofficially became the internet guy for that division. So we were applying the federal securities laws to a bunch of novel issues that the internet posed, and then I also became the white 2K guy in Corp Fin. I didn't seek that, it was thrust upon me because since I was the internet guy, somehow they were equated. And circa around 1998, but that was huge. I ended up talking to the press all the time, so it was great experience and exposure for me. Then as one of the first lawyers to blog, period, in 2002, but certainly the first in our area of law, I was a constant source for journalists. As Sarbanes-Oxley, that came a few months later after I started blogging, created quite a stir and resulted in actually a seismic shift in awareness in corporate governance. So I was talking to the press basically daily for a couple of years. And once you build those relationships with the reporters, you're always there for them. As long as you keep responding to them, you're in, like Flint. One, fully understanding whether you're on the record or not. So this is the number one question that reporters get from newbies. What's the difference between the terms on the record, on background, on deep background, and off the record? It's extremely important to know what these things mean. And even more important to come to an express agreement with a reporter about the things you say which are attributable to you before you say anything. Before you say anything. I can't emphasize enough and highlight to you enough that you need to say explicitly the status of something you're about to say before you say it. Before you say it. So the default is that anything you say is on the record. You can't go back and put the genie in the bottle. Once you say something, it's on the record unless you clarified beforehand that it wasn't. So here's a short explanation for each of the four types of conversations or subsets of a conversation you can have pulled from this useful article. On the record, this means that everything you say can be used and attributed to your name and your job title, unless you specify otherwise, and explicitly gain the prior agreement of the reporter. You can assume everything is on the record. Background, not for attribution. So those two terms are used interchangeably. The comments you make may be quoted directly, but the source may only be identified in general terms, a government insider. So it's up to you and the reporter to determine how precisely you're going to be identified here. And bear in mind that even if you're not specifically identified, it still may be obvious to the audience who the source was. On deep background, some say this is the same as not for attributions. Others believe you can't even quote it. You just paraphrase the information in the story that you get from that source. So in any case, the information provided by source can be used, but the source can't be named directly. So speaking on deep background can be helpful when you want to put pressure on a target without potentially disrupting your working relationship with that target. 4, off the record, the information provided is not for publication. However, the information you provide can be used without attribution to help verify information from another source, whether what that other source said was true. 2, your agreements with reporters are not legally binding. So how do you reach an agreement with a reporter? You do that orally, not by a written agreement, because none of these agreements are legally binding. It's an honor code thing. So you have to really be careful with reporters, particularly those who you haven't had any experience with yet, and never tell a reporter something that you don't want to see in a story. Reporters typically don't want to burn a source, but if you slip and give them something so valuable, so juicy that your relationship pales in comparison to the value of it, you're going to lose out. So you want to be smart here and never say anything, even if you trust a reporter that you think could really harm you, make you lose your job, that kind of thing. 3, reporters might tape your calls. So as noted in this article, it's possible that a reporter might tape your call. Something to remember. And this reporter's recording guide lays out the federal and state laws and about that kind of thing. The guide's fairly dated, but you get the idea here. 4, being off the record entirely can still be useful. Perhaps you're barred from talking with a reporter due to your employer's policy, or you're just worried about getting into trouble, but you still want to help the reporter. So you're going to go off the record. Again, you have to be careful and say those exact words. This is all off the record. So you're going to say those exact words. This is all off the record. Don't forget to do that, to let the reporter know that what you're saying is not for attribution. Then the reporter agrees, yes, I'll keep this confidential. If the reporter doesn't agree, be careful if you hear those magic words. Do they agree? If they don't agree, thank them and get off the phone. You can still be helpful to a reporter when you're off the record. From their perspective, they may need help understanding a situation. You can get them to where they need to be, get them up that knowledge curve to help them write the story without you being cited in it, and that'll be very helpful to them. And maybe it might end up being favorable to your own goals, the way you direct them. But also, of course, you're building the relationship so that maybe next time they call, you're able to speak on the record, get your name in print, and feel all kind of happy and warm inside. 5, don't forget to toggle between off the record and on the record. So sometimes I'll indicate in my conversation with the journalist which part's off the record. I'll do that before I say something, and then I'll indicate that now I'm on the record. So when I do this, I'm careful to invoke the confidentiality at the precise moment I wanted. So I'm talking, I'm going to say, this is all going to be off the record, blah, 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 blah. Then I'm going to say, this is now on the record, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to say, now I'm off the record again. So, I'm toggling back and forth. So it's easy to forget this. Write a big sticky note that you place in front of you to remind you before you even start the call. 6, once you say something on the record, you're stuck with it. So if you're scared about talking to a reporter because you might let something slip, pay attention to your gut instincts here. This article shows you how once you've said something on the record, that's it. It's on the record. Even if on the same call, you remember that you didn't tell the reporter that it was supposed to be off the record and you'd like to remove that comment from the record, it's likely too late. I mean, the journalist might do you a solid and make sure it's off the record, but they don't have to. So as this article reminds us, you can't have an entire conversation with a reporter and at the end just say something like, that was off the record. You can't do that after the fact. 7, deciding whether you want to work with the media in the first place. So let's now back up a bit and cover some of the basics. For some, there's nothing more exciting than seeing your name in the paper. It's cool. It is. It's so much fun. You can show it off to your family and friends. My media highlight was being quoted in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on the front page on the day that I happened to be in Pittsburgh for my wife's huge family reunion, huge, like 100 family members. She married well. And of course, there are the publicity benefits about being cited in the press. You can show it off to existing clients, subtly reminding them that you're an expert in the field and worth the big bucks. It could wind up being something that leads you to new clients. Potential clients might see it and give you a call. More speaking engagements, greater visibility. So, good stuff. But you may be prohibited by a policy where you work from talking to the press, or maybe you're shy to the point where you struggle to even talk on the phone to your friends, or simply you don't have the time. That's a common thing. Or maybe you just don't care about publicity. Those are all very good reasons to just not get into the media game. And you're just watching this video for fun. I can understand it. 8, working with reporters doesn't take much time. So if your excuse is that you don't have the time, knowing that working with a reporter doesn't take a lot of time, really. After gaining some experience, I was really able to limit how much time I spent with reporters dramatically. After a reporter got to know me and trust me, more often than not, our interactions really consisted of a handful of emails per query, no phone calls at all. But that's after I'd put in some time to build up the relationship. Of course, if you're dealing with a bunch of reporters at once, that commitment can add up in a hurry. So then you might be more selective. You're going to pick and choose who you want to deal with, and that's fine. 9, the snowball effect. One quote can go viral. The notion of going viral on social media has long existed in the world of journalism. You might find that if you're quoted in one single newspaper, soon enough a horde of journalists who read that one quote beat down your door. So if you get quoted, particularly in a big name, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, that kind of thing, and then you're going to have 50 other smaller media outlets contact you. They're all dwindling and dying, so I don't know if that's true anymore. Anyways, it doesn't always happen, but it happens more often than you would think, or at least it used to. I don't know. We'll see what happens going forward. 10, cultivating a journalist. So the $64,000 question is, how do I get quoted in the media? And the answer is you need to become a source. And the best way to do that is develop a relationship. And like any relationship, you have to place yourself in the journalist's shoes. Be empathetic. So from the journalist's perspective, they need to find good story ideas to take to their editor, something juicy that's going to sell newspapers. So you want to share compelling story ideas. That's the fastest way to win a reporter's heart. Doing that by email is your best bet. Most journalists work very hard. They're on deadline. they have really limited time to shoot the breeze. I mean, my conversations with some journalists is really like, you think they're being rude, but they're not. That's the way they are, and that's the way they have to be. And I am totally fine with that. I like my phone calls to be short. So there's nothing wrong with sending an unsolicited email to a journalist, even though you've never met them. Their email addresses can often be found online. They love to get story ideas and feedback from the readers, so they're very accessible. And if you happen to meet a journalist at a conference, go up and introduce yourself. Show them that you're normal. The bonus is that I find that they actually tend to be very interesting people. They're very knowledgeable, they're curious, and they may be able to help you in ways you hadn't considered before if you end up developing a real relationship. Because they're talking to a lot of people. They know a lot of people, and they might be able to connect you with people that you wanted to be connected to. So this is a lot of how the real world works. We're going to discuss the role of PR professionals later, but they obviously should have media contacts that can help jumpstart this process of finding reporters that are willing to talk to you. 11, don't expect to be quoted. So if you pay attention to media articles, there are fewer quotes from sources than you might think. It's actually pretty hard to be quoted by name in an article, but it does happen. When I work with a journalist, I go in with the attitude of, I'm going to go help this nice person, but I'm not expecting anything out of it. That way, I'm never disappointed. In fact, the journalist might ask you for a quote and fully intends for it to be in their piece, but their editor might cut it. That happens a lot. The journalist does not have the final word on what gets put in the final product. So be resilient and not take it personally. 12, how to increase your odds of being quoted. So here's where a lot of lawyers get stuck. They're used to being cautious, not willing to share opinions, not being colorful. These are all traits for a quote that ain't going to see the light of day. The quote you offer can't read like a law firm memo. It has to have a little pizzazz. I always preach to write like you talk, and that goes doubles for quotes. It should sound a little off the cuff. So the people you see get quoted are the ones that journalists think are quippy, and shout out to Francine Mckenna for coining that term, quippy. Quippy. They're always ready with a quote if a reporter calls because they just keep up with the action in the arena, and they know how to make dry material come alive, to come to life with a provocative or a memorable take. And it helps if they're willing to face the consequences of a little bit of a strong opinion. A journalist might be willing to accept your boring quote, but their editor, again, might toss it if it's too boring. And remember, quotes are typically short. Look at some in the paper. Less is more. They might only be a handful of words long. That's typical. A dozen at the most. So again, look at a paper and see what they look like, and that's how you can become quippy yourself. 13, offer to send a quote by email. This doesn't always work for a journalist, but I often have a phone conversation and answer any questions they might have. And as part of that conversation, I offer to email over a quote for them to consider it if they need it. Since I'm experienced in the art of what's a good quote, I'm quippy, this arrangement works out for both of us most of the time. Doing this benefits me because I can control the risk of being misquoted. That can happen. And also allows me to ensure that my unusual name is spelled properly, B-R-O-C, a little bit unusual. And it benefits the reporter because they can just cut and paste from my email. 14, getting your name and affiliation right. So a journalist isn't going to show you a draft of what they've written up. If you're dealing with them over the phone, you're not even going to really know what they're going to grab from your conversation as a quote if you're on the record. That's just how it works. So I recommend that you make some effort to ensure that the reporter gets your name spelled correctly. If you have an unusual name, same with the spelling of who you work for. Offer to send the reporter an email with the proper spelling and preferred affiliation. It really takes the air out of your balloon to be quoted and then find that your name's spelled incorrectly. Some publications won't use your affiliation the way you want them to, regardless of what you tell them. So in my old job, I wanted them to say I was editor of the corporatecounsel.net, but often they would just say I was a former SEC lawyer or just leave out my affiliation altogether. They just put my name in. So nothing you can do. You just try for what you want. 15, not all journalists are created equal. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that the quality of journalists out there really varies widely. And my first exposure to working with the press came in the mid-90s when I was at the SEC and handled a number of inquiries about the impact of this new internet thing in the securities law. And then my experience was ramped up with Y2K, as I mentioned before. And the reporters I dealt with typically were quite sophisticated. But when I left the SEC and started blogging just before the internet boom melted, and I started dealing with a new breed of reporters. So after Sarbanes-Oxley made corporate governance a household name for the first time, I was dealing with reporters who told me that they had been running the obits just a week earlier. Seriously, the obituaries. They had no clue about this stuff. It was a real pain in the butt. 16, save your scoops for savvy reporters. So the best journalists are the ones capable of asking you questions that are insightful. If you have a real scoop, these reporters are smart enough to know that you don't want to reveal this compelling item that you've worked on for a real long time to just any old reporter. A sophisticated reporter negotiates with you and asks what your goals are, before you're willing to share this valuable knowledge. They should be business savvy like that. If they're not, that's a big red flag. You might waste your scoop on a reporter who doesn't give it daylight and the prominence it deserves. You want to find another reporter who will do justice to your scoop. 17, return calls quickly. This is journalism 101. Time is money, meaning the reporters often have tight deadlines. And if their time is tight, they will move on to another source fast if they don't reach you initially. Real fast sometimes. Sometimes returning a call in 10 minutes might be too late. And if you do respond and it's too late, do not take it personally. That's just the nature of their business. They need to get stuff to their editor sometimes, like within an hour or two. Let them know that you understand and that it's okay, so they're not embarrassed to try you again some other time. 18, return calls even if you don't know the answer or can't comment. So I always make it a point to let a reporter know as fast as I can that I can help them if that's the case. I don't ignore the call. That enables that reporter to move on quickly, particularly helpful to them if they're on a tight deadline. It's fine if you don't return a reporter's call. Life is short and there's plenty of other things you got to worry about in life. But if you burn a reporter, you might not get a second bite at the apple. That's just the way it is. So if I'm too busy or I just don't know the answer to the query, I'm always careful to respond in some way to a reporter's inquiry to let them know I'm not able to help this time around, just as a courtesy. That way I increase the likelihood that they're not going to write me off forever. 19, refer reporters to others who might know the answer. All right, so one benefit of the job I've had the past few decades is that I know a lot of people. So if a reporter calls me with a question that I can't answer, I often can refer them to a few people I think can help. And that's gold for reporters, that they often need to talk to more than one person anyways, if they're at a reputable publication as part of their verification process. It's also gold for them since they're normally calling more people than they expect to connect with because they know they're throwing something at the wall and hoping something will stick. So if I help narrow their search to specific people who are really capable of answering their query, I've just enhanced my own relationship with the reporter, even though I didn't know the answer to their query myself. It's a win-win. After I make the referral, I actually email the people that I referred. I give them a heads up that a reporter might call. I want to get I want to get credit with them too for our relationship between me and the person to whom I made the referral. And so I let them know in advance what the question is so they can be prepared and do a little advanced research if they plan on talking to their reporter. And if the referral responds saying that, I'm out of pocket or I have a client conflict, I can't talk to their reporter, if they actually respond to my email, I actually then go back to the reporter. I'll email the reporter back and say, hey, I contacted that person I referred to you. They're not going to be able to talk to you. And if I can, I provide a replacement referral. This doesn't take much time to do. 20, the role of PR professionals. So there are a number of public relations firms out there whose specialty is media relations. The representatives of these firms work full-time to cultivate reporters and to guide their clients in how to put their best foot forward when they're dealing with the media. They can tell you which reporters are sophisticated, perhaps what types of stories appeal to them, how you might best approach them, or more likely, they can connect you directly to them so that you can be a source. This is what they're paid to do. So they can also coach you in how to speak to reporters. Hopefully they're saying a lot of the same things I'm saying in this video. How to say things that will enhance your reputation, not hurt it. How to talk in a way that the reporting audience will want to be talked to. How to be quippy. And then how to follow up if you're quoted so you can leverage that with existing and potential clients. So how to actually market the fact that you were just quoted, something that's often left on the table by many, including me. So there's a real art to this entire process, and there's always a real pro in the field that can help teach you where you need to be. But hopefully I've been helpful with you with this very comprehensive video, 20 points. So let me know what you think.